Join me now to weigh in on it all, representing Texas's 4th Congressional District, Congressman Pat Fallon. Congressman, welcome to the program. So there's a lot to break down there, but first I'll get started with New York City's Macys Day Parade. So for our viewers who don't know, I used to live in New York City, and I used to work for Fox, where we had an amazing view of the parade. You know, it's an iconic parade, happens every year, and I've heard both sides of the argument. Some say that we are America and we should show that we're strong and we should continue moving forward despite what had happened. And then I've heard other people say, you know, other communities who have their own Thanksgiving and Christmas parades who are now concerned considering what had just happened just a few days ago. So where do you stand on that issue?
Well, Jasmine, thanks for having me on, and happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, I think the latter, or the former, which is we are Americans. We need to continue to live our lives. Life has an inherent risk, and our great law enforcement, although Mayor de Blasio has not been a supporter of and not been backing the blue over the years, New York City's finest are still, I think, going to do a very good job in making sure that the folks that attend the parade are safe. And if people that don't feel like they'll be safe, they don't have to attend the parade. So I think across the country, we need to celebrate what makes us great and give thanks and, you know, and move on. This tragedy is horrific. And it's liberal policies like, you know, this quote unquote liberal bail reform that let these scumbags out, like this fella. You know, he had a reckless endangerment, possession of a felony, a felon in possession of a dangerous weapon. And the bail was $500. That was just back in July of 2020. That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and you speak of the suspect. So typically I don't like to give men like this attention. I don't like to use their name. I try to avoid using their face as much as possible to not embolden any others who may have similar ideas. But when you do look at this man's past, you know, like we said, he had a lengthy criminal history, and now we're learning that he was also very anti-Trump, and we're also learning that he was a minority. And if you look at the situation, and if the roles were reversed, and if he were a white man who supported Trump, the outrage would be out of this world. You'd see his face across every media headline, but we're not seeing that same response right now. Why do you think that is?
Well, because this is an isolated incident. This is just a scumbag individual, and no group is responsible for what he did. But as you said, if it were reversed, I fear that the left-wing media, which is most of the media, would splash it on their headlines. CNN would have it. MSNBC would lead with it for a year and saying hate is on the rise. And God forbid he would, you know, run over some minority folks. So it's one of those things where who's at fault here? There's one career criminal, scumbag, now serial killer that did this. And that's where it begins and it ends. However, he should have already been in a cage for his prior actions, because this is somebody that's just a predator. He's hurting people. And now the worst has happened, where somebody like this that has been harming children and people that are unfortunate enough to cross his path now took 6 lives and injured 47 people and created this horrific Thanksgiving Day nightmare for the entire country.
Yeah, and as for the man who let him into his house, the video that we showed in our intro, this poor man thought he was helping a homeless guy. He gave him clothes, he let him use his phone, he even fed him. Can you imagine how terrifying that must have been? I mean, what was your response when you saw that video?
Oh, what a manipulator. I mean, this guy, these folks, some of these folks are just dastardly. He just murdered 6 people, and now that we know that in a child, he plowed through a crowd, you know, with a vehicle, and then to go in there and essentially, you could have given him an Academy Award. It was very convincing. This is why 3 strikes and you're out works. That's why crime collapsed in the 1990s. We take these kind of career criminals, they just don't stop. If this guy was let out tomorrow, he would hurt somebody else, pretty much with 100% guarantee. That's why some people, unfortunately, just don't belong in society, and they belong behind bars.
We do, and according to Senator Johnson, he says that what happened in Wisconsin is just a result of Democratic leadership because they've emboldened this lawlessness in our country. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I do wholeheartedly with Senator Johnson, because he's speaking common sense. I mean, look what happened in Portland and San Francisco. Would you want to go there right now? Jez, I wouldn't. They decriminalized theft. Anything under $300 or $950 is like, whatever, that's fine. And then what happens? You get gangs of people going into high-end stores and stealing just really at a whim. Just nobody's stopping them. The police they look the other way because of the political leadership in those two cities. It is the wild, wild west out there, and it has to stop. But now you've got liberals saying, well, we've got to do something about it. Conservatives could have told them that when they implemented the policies a year or two ago.
Absolutely. And you know it's bad, the crime that's happening across our country, when even MSNBC is admitting it. Listen.
A good friend of ours went into a Louboutin store to get a pair of sweats. About 10 people stormed into the store, pulled out guns, and just started piling stuff into suitcases. San Francisco is out of control. Portland is out of control. And you look, in part, you're right, Willie. I mean, laws have consequences.
Laws have consequences. So, Congressman, when do you think they'll put two and two together and realize that Democratic leadership and ideas just aren't working?
Well, they are very selective in their enforcement, as we see along the border, right? I mean, there are laws in the books. We're supposed to be a rule of law nation, but liberals are notorious for ignoring laws they don't like. For instance, they've decriminalized property theft out west in Portland and San Francisco, which just talked about $950 or less. And then there's a man on January 6th that was criminally trespassing in the Capitol and stole Nancy Pelosi's podium, of which they recovered. I believe the value of that podium is about $300. So given the liberal logic, he shouldn't be prosecuted at all because it was under $950. But this guy just got sentenced to 6 months in prison. So they're very inconsistent and hypocritical, perhaps, with the way in which they do it. Because if it's one of, quote unquote, their folks, if it's one of their voters, they're perfectly fine with it. But if it's somebody that they don't agree with politically, they want to throw the book at them.
I could not have said it better myself. Well, we're all out of time. Thank you so much, Congressman, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Ed. God bless, and happy Thanksgiving.